You guys know it's that time. Let's get to this. You know, I should probably turn on a light outside of the lightsaber here, so let me do that. I'll be right back. At last, we have come to my most anticipated movie of 2017, Star Wars Episode 8, The Last Jedi. This movie is written and directed by Rian Johnson, the man responsible for Brick, Looper, some of the best Breaking Bad episodes, and for introducing The Last Jedi screening that I went to. That was a complete surprise to see Rian Johnson introduce the screening, say thank you guys for coming, and let's watch Star Wars. But anyway, this movie picks up directly where The Force Awakens left off, where Rey travels to the water planet of Ahch-To after learning the discovery of Luke Skywalker on behalf of the Resistance. So as we saw in The Force Awakens, she successfully finds Luke in the hopes that she can be trained as a Jedi. At the same time, the First Order is seeking revenge on the Resistance, who evacuated from their base on Dukar to try to find a new base, and let's just stop right there because I'm worried I might get into spoilers, but there's a lot going on in this movie, and you know what? I think it all works really well. This is a very unique Star Wars movie, in my opinion. I mean, it takes a lot for me to be surprised with something relating to Star Wars. People could argue that killing off all the main characters in Rogue One was a surprise, but with the context of that story and what happens afterwards, there was no other way they could have done it. But with The Last Jedi, there's a lot of things in this movie that just don't go as you think. In the words of Luke Skywalker, this is not going to go the way you think. Every time this movie starts to do something and you automatically think, okay, I see how this is going to play out, especially if you're a big fan of the franchise and know these movies by heart like me, even the prequels, it'll suddenly do a complete 180 and do something that you don't see coming at all. And sometimes that could either be a good thing or a bad thing. Like, let's take The Phantom Menace. I know that horse is long dead, but when you look at The Phantom Menace, it does some things that you don't completely expect the movie to do, but it just goes the complete wrong way. The Last Jedi, on the other hand, is an example where these unexpected turns are done in the right way. Like, they're unexpected, but they're well needed. They help keep the franchise fresh and often surprising. You got your key characters from the last movie making a return again, and they all still do a really good job. Daisy Ridley is still great as Rey, and she's given a lot more character development, especially since she's with Luke and is learning to try to tap more into the Force, because in the last movie, the Force awakened inside of her. That sounds really weird, but anyway, she's great. It's great to see Finn back again, and especially when he teams up with the Resistance mechanic Rose, and they go on their little adventure. The dynamic between those two is actually really great, and I really like Rose as a character. And thank God we got to see more of Poe Dameron in this movie, because in The Force Awakens, I won't say he was useless per se, but he just didn't have a whole lot to do. Here, we really get to see him become a true leader. He still has sort of that cocky attitude, because I guess out of the new trio, or now I guess Rose is part of that group, Poe always felt like the cocky type, sort of like Han Solo, but Poe really comes into his own as a true leader within the Resistance. Now, what about Mark Hamill? We waited 32 years in between Return of the Jedi and The Force Awakens. Well, I wasn't born when Return of the Jedi came out, but regardless, we, as the collective we, waited that long to see Luke Skywalker again. But we had to wait another 2 years to actually see him talk, and Mark Hamill does an amazing job in this movie. Luke Skywalker in this movie is not the same Luke that you remember from Return of the Jedi, but considering all the backstory that we've been told and what The Force Awakens set up, I didn't expect him to be the same Luke Skywalker that we saw back in the original trilogy, and it just leads to the most complex version of Luke Skywalker that we've seen. It still stays very true to who Luke is as a character, and it just works really well. Mark Hamill is incredible in this role. Like, this is the best performance he's given as Luke Skywalker. Now, one of the things that I noticed when watching the official trailer that came out 2 months ago is that this entire trilogy seems to be a story about both Rey and Kylo Ren. And I won't say much about Kylo Ren in this movie, but I will say, if you thought he was kind of a weak character in The Force Awakens, you are going to eat your words with this, because Kylo Ren really does kick ass. Not just in terms of like combat or action scenes, but just in terms of how the character is developed further. He's awesome. Now let's talk about Carrie Fisher, because as we all know, last year she passed away, sadly, and this is her final film role, and it's very fitting that her last film role is that of Leia. And she's really good here. Mark Hamill is probably the best actor in this entire movie, but Leia does provide a lot of heart and soul for the Resistance as a whole, and just within all the main characters. She's great. The score by John Williams is once again great. He brings back a lot of his classic themes from the original trilogy. I won't say because one of those themes is a spoiler. And then the action scenes are really great. They bring in a lot of new vehicles. Like the ski speeders are pretty cool. And I love the entire battle on Crate with the ski speeders, the AT-M6 walkers. And a lot of the space battles are really cool. There's a lot of great camera work because J.J. Abrams and Rian Johnson and Gareth Edwards know how to really utilize the camera in ways that George Lucas couldn't in the prequels. I did have some issues with the movie. One of them is the pacing. This is the first Star Wars movie that runs over 2.5 hours, and you do feel the length. It doesn't have the great pace that The Force Awakens does, because I literally rewatched The Force Awakens before seeing The Last Jedi, and every time I watch The Force Awakens, at a point when I think I'm 10 minutes into the movie, I'm actually 30 minutes in the movie because it moves so quickly. The Last Jedi, in terms of its length and pacing, is very reminiscent of The Dark Knight, where it's never boring, but you're just sitting there wondering, what can you do next? But again, this plays into the idea of this is not going to go the way you think. I guess it's just more of a warning that this is longer than The Force Awakens and it doesn't move as fast as The Force Awakens. But then again, neither did Empire when you compare it to A New Hope. Other issues I had was I don't think a lot of the comedy worked all the time, mainly from BB-8. I still really like BB-8 because I've got his shirt, for Christ's sake. There are a few comedic elements with him that just go a little too far over the edge. Because The Force Awakens did a really good job at having subtle humor with BB-8, this one kind of goes overboard. And I guess I should address this. For anyone who's worried about BB-9E, the evil BB-8, he's barely in this movie, so you people were worked up for nothing. You were so worried that there was going to be this cute droid-on-droid fight when it was nothing. And that's not really a spoiler at all. And then the Porgs, they're kind of nothing too. They have their cute moments here and there, but they're not the Ewoks. There are not points in this movie where they take over completely. They're just there. They're creatures. So those are the complaints that I have that I can actually talk about without spoiling anything, because I'm going to wrap it up now. I have a lot more to say about this movie, but I can't say it without spoiling, so I'll just say that The Last Jedi is a great film. It's a great Star Wars film. It might be a little bit better than The Force Awakens. I know I really love The Force Awakens, and in my review for that movie, I went apeshit for it. But then again, that was the first live-action Star Wars movie in 10 years. This review, I may have been a little more calm throughout it, not as fanboyish, but I love this better than The Force Awakens. It's still not as good as Empire Strikes Back. Empire Strikes Back will still be the superior Star Wars film. And I know one concern about this movie going in for a lot of people is this going to be a remake of Empire Strikes Back, or remake? Because after rewatching The Force Awakens, I was like, okay, there are a few similarities between that and A New Hope, but they're all surface level, and the stories are actually completely different. In The Last Jedi, there are few moments, like you could count them on one hand, that remind you of Empire Strikes Back, but in terms of the story and how it progresses the characters further, two completely different movies. They are not the same film at all. But staying on track with The Last Jedi and my overall thoughts, it takes the Star Wars saga in a route that is well earned. I really love The Force Awakens, but The Last Jedi took a lot of risks. Again, in the words of Luke Skywalker, this is not going to go the way you think. And a lot of the risks that this movie takes really pay off in spades. The action's exciting, the characters are great, there's some beautiful imagery, especially with the crimson red color scheme that dominates this movie. And it takes a lot of these elements that we know from the Force and expands on it even further. There are a lot of neat tricks involving the Force that we see here for the first time. And it just continues to give this new trilogy that magical fantasy element that made the original trilogy so great to begin with. So I actually had to wait an hour before I recorded this review to get my thoughts straight, because if I had recorded it right after seeing the movie, I would have said it's worth seeing in your lifetime. But the more I think about it, the more I really admire all the risks that The Last Jedi takes and just all the really cool stuff that it does in terms of its story and characters, that I gotta say, get off your ass and go see it right now. Sure, I might sound like I'm fanboying because I'm a big Star Wars fan, but this is truly a great movie. And while I say get off your ass and go see it right now, I say it with the caveat that, again, this is not going to go the way you think. You're going to get a lot of unexpected twists and turns with The Last Jedi, but for me, they pay off in spades, and I love this movie. And that's my review for Star Wars Episode 8, The Last Jedi. Stay tuned in a couple days where I give my full-fledged spoiler review, because there is a shit ton of spoilers that I want to drop for The Last Jedi, but I'm generous and giving you a spoiler-free review first. So until then, I hope you enjoyed this review. Leave a comment down below and tell me what your thoughts are on the movie, if and when you've seen it. And as always, this is the real Mr. Robinson telling you there's only one, and may the Force be with you always.